On September 6, 2015, 32-year-old Henry McCabe spent the evening at Pavlitsky's, a club in Spring Lake Park, Minnesota, with his friends William Kennedy and Calvin Johnson. His wife Corrine and his 2 daughters were out of state. They were in California, so he was able to squeeze in a night out. It was indeed fun. So fun that his pals took his keys and wallet to prevent him from buying more drinks and driving home drunk. Around 1:40 a.m., a very drunk Henry left the club with William. Driving while intoxicated is not safe, even if his home was just 2 miles away from the club. Thankfully, his caring friend William was there to drive for him. However, instead of going home, Henry asked to be dropped off at a Super America gas station. William was allegedly confused why his friend would want to go there in the wee hours of the morning, but he agreed to take him there anyway. At 2:28 a.m., Corrine received a strange call from her husband. When she answered it, she heard high-pitched growling, yelling, grunts, and moans of pain. At first, she thought that Henry accidentally dialed her number, but soon she realized that it was a call for help. He told her that someone shot him. He was screaming in distress and was obviously caught in a struggle and needed to be saved. Corrine panicked. The very first person she called was Tim Borbor, Henry's brother. While Henry was on the line, she used another phone to dial Tim. Tim wasn't able to answer it, but luckily his voicemail picked up and was able to record the last 2 minutes of Henry's strange call. The entire recording wasn't released to the public, but parts of it were featured by ABC News in this story. Here, listen. There was a male voice, which probably belonged to Henry or another man at the scene, that said, "Stop it." Shortly after, the call ended. Corrine tried to call Henry's phone back, but it went straight to voicemail. This strange call is the striking detail that actually made this already troubling case even more disturbing. Where was he? Who would do that to him? The next day, when Tim listened to the voicemail, he knew immediately that something was wrong. That was when they filed a missing person report. Of course, authorities first turned to the people who were with him that fateful night at the club. William Kennedy, the last person to see Henry, was one of the first ones to be questioned. Police were initially suspicious of William since they couldn't find a surveillance video of him dropping off Henry at the Super America gas station. But he was so adamant that he did drop him off at that exact place. They would later discover footage proving that William did drop Henry off, but not at Super America, but the Holiday gas station. Perhaps he got confused with the 2 gas stations. After all, he was driving during the early hours of the morning and was presumably drunk too. Well, who wouldn't suspect this so-called friend? Remember, William and Calvin took Henry's keys and wallet to stop him from driving and buying more drinks. They had never given the wallet and keys back, even after leaving the club. Calvin still had his wallet, while Kennedy had the keys. They turned these things over to the authorities when they were questioned. Why would he drop an intoxicated friend in a gas station in the early hours of the morning with no money? A massive search and rescue team was dispatched to look for Henry McCabe. The search went on and stretched as far as California and his homeland Liberia, yet their efforts were fruitless. They also looked into his phone records, and it showed that he made 3 calls after he was last seen. William Kennedy's phone records were checked as well and compared with that of Henry's. The finding wasn't released to the public, but we can say that nothing substantial came out of it since the case somehow went cold. There were controversies too. Initially, the Minnesota Community Police Department was deeply involved in this matter, which at the time was a missing person case. They even worked with the Liberian community and raised $10,000 as reward money. However, a month later, they rescinded the reward because of the misunderstanding between their organization and Henry's wife Corrine. David Singleton, the head of the Minnesota Community Policing Services, accused Corrine of withholding information from investigators and misleading the public. Corrine maintained that her statements to the authorities have all been truthful. The disagreement was never resolved, and the McCabe family ended up cutting ties with them. They chose to work with a different agency moving forward. At some point, they also worked with the FBI to bring light to Henry's case. Henry seemingly vanished without a trace after that weird phone call. He didn't go to work. There was no activity in his bank account or even on his phone. Where could he be? On November 2nd, 2 months after his disappearance, they finally found him. A kayaker found Henry's body face down in Rush Lake, 6 miles from the gas station he was dropped off, and in the opposite direction of his house. There were no injuries or any signs of trauma to his body, no bruises, scratches, and no gunshot wounds that Henry claimed there would be on the phone call. The autopsy concluded that he died of accidental drowning. The time of death was around the early hours of September 7th. Of course, just like any other crime, the discovery of the body led to more questions. First, what did he do at the gas station? Did he meet up with someone? If yes, who was it? How did an intoxicated Henry find his way to Rush Lake? The location wasn't just a few steps away from the gas station. Does that mean that after he was dropped off, he hitched a ride and headed to that location? Or did the person he met up with take him there? Why were some of the people closest to him withholding and manipulating information? Rush Lake, by the way, is not a remote forested area. Unlike what other people who follow the case believe, Rush Lake is not surrounded by dense foliage. It's located in a suburb and near the freeway, with many business establishments around. It was also impossible for his dead body to float its way in there, since there are no streams around. Have a glimpse of the distance between the spot where his body was found, his house, the nightclub, the actual gas station where he was dropped, and even the false gas station. The case was plagued with conflicting statements, false information to police, questionable friends, and a bizarre phone call. And the distances between the places are so intriguing. One moment, Henry was drinking at the local club with a friend, and then hours later, he ended up dead. Henry McCabe seemed like an ordinary man. At the time of his death, he worked as a Minnesota state auditor, a job he supposedly loved, and had been married for 11 years with 2 beautiful children. For sure, he wasn't perfect, but he lived a pretty normal life. He had a good reputation. Why would he die like that all of a sudden? People don't believe that he died of accidental drowning, due to odd details that don't add up. The case became the center of many conspiracy theories. The first and most common speculation was that his so-called friends, William Kennedy and Calvin Johnson, have something to do with his death. Would you be so worried about your drunk friend that you would take away his wallet and keys and not return them once you go your separate ways? Alcohol may impair a person's mental state. Why drop him alone at a gas station without any money? They should have returned his belongings and took him home. Even if he wanted to go somewhere else, the fact that he was intoxicated home was the only option. Dropping him off somewhere else doesn't make sense at all. So, they may have something to do with that eerie call and his death. As for the motive, we don't know. Who knows if these people hold grudges against each other? The second theory was grounded on money. Some say that the reason why Henry asked to be dropped at the gas station was that he was trying to meet someone. Maybe he was trying to borrow money from that person, but something went wrong and that led to his death. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding between the two. Despite having a good job, investigators noted that Henry had very little money. A few weeks before his disappearance, he had bounced a rent check. He had also had recent troubles at work and even received a bad review. It's likely that he was going through something financially and was scared that he might lose his job soon. He tried to borrow money from someone, but things clearly went wrong and he ended up dead in a river. Third, he was drugged in the club and was hallucinating during the phone call. His family claimed that he knew how to swim, so that explains why he wasn't able to swim and save himself. He wasn't in his right state of mind. Toxicology tests were performed immediately after his body was taken out of the water. The results were never released though. But yes, there's a possibility that Henry actually did drown after being drugged by someone. The fourth theory was related to drugs too, yet this time framing Henry McCabe as a drug dealer. Henry seemed to be a successful, financially stable person, but since he was going through some financial problems, this led people to speculate that he also succumbed to drugs. If he wasn't drugged, maybe he was meeting with a dealer and an altercation ensued after he realized he couldn't find his wallet. He probably tried to talk the dealer into giving him some drugs and allowing him to pay the next day. The dealer possibly assumed that Henry was broke all along and tricked him into meeting up in hopes of getting a free stash. Poor man. Now the fifth theory speaks nothing of killers and drug dealers. Some people believe that Henry committed suicide. The reason? Sources say that he may have been dealing with depression because of money and marital problems. As a way to deal with those issues, he drank a lot, and perhaps that night he realized that he couldn't take it anymore and killed himself. Now, the sixth and most controversial theory focuses on Henry's Liberian roots. The Liberian Civil War took place from 1989 to 1996, and it was actually the reason why Henry moved to the US. He wanted to escape the war and violence in his homeland, which he endured for 14 years before leaving. Lovetta Tugba, one of the leaders of the local Liberian community, was convinced that Henry's death had something to do with the war, so they wanted to find out what really happened. Henry's mom felt that her son was sacrificed in a Liberian ritual. Could that be true? Henry and his wife Corinne were part of the Liberian American community in California before moving to Minnesota. Over 25,000 people with Liberian roots live in Minnesota, and because of the tragedy, the Liberian American community became very concerned and anxious. For Lovetta Tugba, the McCabe family, and many Liberian Americans, investigators shouldn't rule out the possibility that Henry's death was connected to the atrocities in his home country. Have you ever wondered why the FBI was involved in the investigation? They don't usually deal with accidental drowning cases. Maybe this was the reason why. They really took this theory seriously, and glad they did. The family deserves to know the truth. The last speculation, the craziest one, speaks of Henry McCabe being attacked by some sort of animal, thus explaining the strange growling sounds in the recording. They say that it's probably a wolf or a bear. That's a weak argument though, since the gas station and Rush Lake were far from forested areas. So it's either he was murdered by another person or he killed himself. As for the growling sounds, many assume it was just Henry making drunken, distressed noises. For some, it sounded like a person struggling in the waters. For the authorities, it's clear that he died of drowning. How about you? What do you think? Wait, have you ever heard of this case before? While one of the strangest, I don't think it received that much attention from the media and public. I'm sure that many of you have heard of this just now. We'll end this video here, but if there's anything you want to share about this, please comment down below. I'm always looking forward to our discussions after every episode. If there are other topics you want us to talk about in the upcoming videos, you can comment that as well. So there. I really hope you enjoyed watching this. If you loved it, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. And if you want to watch more stories like this one, click the notification bell to get notified each time there's a new video. We upload new episodes around 3 times a week, so feel free to submit your suggestions. I'll see you guys soon.